Welcome back, everyone. Dr. Cindy here with Brooke Jack, my co-host, and you're listening to the Joy Prescription podcast. Last month, we talked about our experience living through Hurricane Helene and the aftermath in the mountains of Western North Carolina. Two things you don't usually hear together, hurricane and mountains. So we shared our experiences and how it impacted our community, just really scratched the surface of that. And today is a continuation of that, our discussion that we're having, where we're going to dive into the final two questions that I have for us, which are, what are we doing to be better prepared for any kind of disaster that might strike in the future, and how God has showed up for us and our community in the storm and in the aftermath. So, Brooke, I've been waiting to hear. I know you and your husband are homesteaders and planners, and you were definitely way more prepared for the storm than we were, and a lot of our listeners. So I'd love to hear your reflections on, what you're glad you had in place and what you might change for the future, and just kind of your thinking around preparing and preparedness. I know from a spiritual perspective, because it definitely can get unbalanced and out of hand, and pull us kind of in a selfish, fearful mindset and mode. And of course, when I'm talking about preparedness, I'm, coming from a perspective of how do we be a good steward of what we've been given? How do we be prudent and prepare in a way that's going to help us weather any challenges in the best way that we can, knowing that God has us and He's sovereign and He's going to provide for us, and wanting to be in the best place that we can to have strength and resilience to be able to show up and serve others and tend to people during any kind of future disaster. So love to hear your reflections on that.
So one of the phrases that we've been talking about for probably the past 2 years at our church and our church community has been preparation is action. And that is something that we have emphasized quite a bit through various conversations and discussions. We also have discussed about just practicing hospitality and how does practicing, we're told that in Romans, practice hospitality. Okay, what does that look like to practice hospitality? How can we, and these are questions that, our listeners can ask themselves and their family, how can we be hospitable in the place where we are, with the resources we have, with the skills we have, with the passions, gifts, talents that we have, looking at what's already in our hands, and also then thinking about maybe where we would like to be and what's involved in that process. What equipment or skills do we need to have in order to practice hospitality in this way that our heart is being drawn to. But just in practicing hospitality, it's not about you anymore. It's about others. And I think that is one of the biggest things when it comes to preparedness, is that if you're prepared, you can help others. You can be equipped to move into action quicker when a crisis hits, when something happens. And so having, food in your pantry, having a stocked pantry, where you can, provide food for other people, or having, a gas tank full of gasoline in your car, and you're able to be a source of transportation or whatever. But if we can shift our mentality from preparedness being me and mine in a survival mode, and start thinking about serving and helping others who don't have those resources or weren't prepared. Then it's like such a beautiful thing for us to be able to be the hands and feet of Christ in those moments. So yes, preparation is action has been a big theme. And one of the conversations that Lucas and I have had during this season of the storm has been about priority of preparation. And of course, first and foremost, your spiritual preparation, eternal priorities, eternal perspective. I think this has been such an eye opener, because material things are material things, at the end of the day. And they cannot be our security, because they are temporal. And as we've seen with this storm, the force and the power of water doing damage that we could have never imagined. And so having preparation for your soul and your spirit, I think, is just so huge, because no one is promised tomorrow. And so having ourselves prepared eternally by surrendering to a personal relationship with Christ and receiving that grace and that forgiveness and that eternal life is huge. I really hope that those whose maybe hearts have been hardened toward the Lord, that this experience will somehow shatter that hardness and break them free from that, to be open to the gospel. This earth and all the things are going to pass away, but our soul and spirit will live forever someplace. And so I hope this will propel more people into that place of seeking after the Lord. But then also relationships, preparing our relationships. Lucas and I have met so many more of our neighbors and people in our community through this experience. We already had a pretty good, like acquaintance with some neighbors, but like we have met so many more people, and those people have been resources for us, and we've been resources for them. And so I would encourage people who, wherever you're at, wherever you're listening, whatever weather things may or may not be common in your area, don't wait for a catastrophe. Don't wait for a crisis to reach out to your neighbors. Take that initiative now to start building those relationships and building those friendships. They may not be friendships that you get together every evening and play cards and whatever, but just knowing and checking in on each other, and knowing kind of skills and things, and just enough about each other that you can work together and team up. Those relationships, but the relationships also of your immediate family, your marriage, your relationship with your children, because the thing that you realize in a crisis situation, when the pressure is high, when the stress is increased, there's more pressure put on those relationships with the people that you live with and that you're connected with. And, those are the relationships that you have to have the most grace with. But being intentional on a daily basis, weekly basis, that kind of a thing, to invest in those relationships, to, stay intimately connected, helps make you stronger in a place of crisis. And so for relationships that have, maybe been neglected, now is the time, don't wait. Now is the time. And that's definitely something that, comes to mind, because it's like you can have the generator. You
Yeah.
can have, the water or whatever, but if there's tension and friction and other
Mm.
things aren't in a place of preparation, then it's just going to make it a lot harder in an already trying season. So,
Wise counsel. So true. Love that. You have such a good 30,000 foot perspective on the big things, which are our community and our love relationships with our loved ones and our
yeah,
spiritual connection to God. Those are the foundation
absolutely.
of preparation. I
Yeah.
love that you went right there. My mind goes to the spreadsheet of what am I, what are my prep items that I need?
Yeah.
So true. Yeah.
Another thing that I think is a good preparation and something for people to think about too is evaluating their strengths and roles, because what I observed in this is, and I felt it, this hits, and your heart is, how do I help? I want to do something. And you almost feel this sense of like chaos in, where do I plug in to help? What do I
Yeah.
do? But this is a marathon, not a sprint. And
Yeah.
that is something that I have been keeping perspective in. And I think that is important in any kind of crisis. We love football and sports, and it's like somebody has to play the second half of this,
Right.
like you got, your players that are going out there first and taking care of business, but after a while they're going to get tired and they're going to need rest. And so who's coming in the second half? And so recognizing like where you can play a role and giving yourself grace and permission, to rest when you need it. In this, as we were working to just do some food and supply distribution in our little area of Leicester, there was one day that, after spending several days of just being in motion and hearing, not just the stories of people's experience or hardship from the storm, but even just other burdens and things that they were carrying in beforehand, you
Yeah.
know, grandchildren dealing with medical issues, or, other things that were just weighing on them, and hearing them share that stuff. I recognized, I've got to have a day. I've got to have a day of rest. I've got to have a day to get my own house in order and do some things. And I gave myself permission to do that. It was just like, okay, this is my boundary. And for me to continue to serve well in this season, I need to recognize that I can't go 90 miles an hour without taking some time to recharge and process emotions and release burden to the Lord. And so that is also very important in preparing, is knowing your role, knowing where you have strengths, and not getting worked up or upset or feeling shame or guilt around the things that you maybe can't do or don't have capacity for, because each of us is valuable and important in the role that we play. And
Mhm.
so I think that's such an important perspective to keep in times of crisis.
Thank you for giving voice to that, Brooke, because I know you're not alone. Certainly, many people that I talk to feel this sense of like, I should be out there hiking up remote mountains, rescuing babies and bringing generators and thank God there's people that are equipped and empowered to do that,
Mm-hmm.
especially those of us who are dealing with the the aftermath in our own way and having to, pick up the pieces and carry on our daily life and our businesses and work and
Mm-hmm.
school. Guilt, that kind of survivor's guilt can
Mhm.
weigh on you and make you feel like you're not enough, you're not doing enough, you're not helping in the best possible way. And I know my
Mhm.
dear 20-year-old daughter who's away out of state at school and for college. She wants to come home and help and feeling guilty about being away. And I said that God didn't have this for you to
Mhm.
experience. He has something else for you to experience right now. And just on a personal level, I had a business trip, a wonderful, inspirational, educational weekend planned and out of town, and I went to it, and I had a little twinge of guilt about it, getting to stay in a nice hotel and take a hot shower, and knew my family wasn't, but I truly believe that God gifted that to me in order to build me up, to give me that time of,
Mhm.
healing and reflection and reinvigorate enthusiasm around, my medical practice and the way that I'm showing up and caring for people in the way I uniquely can.
Exactly.
So we all, like you said, we all have our different roles and our strengths and gifts, and don't beat yourself up. Don't, give yourself grace for wherever you are, whether that's, the need to take time off and repair and recuperate yourself, or, in whatever ways that you're able to help. It's
Mhm.
good enough. Good
Exactly.
enough.
Exactly. And for those, and I've seen the opposite, those who, well, kind of what you were saying, very similar, though, those who have the ability to go and put money back into the economy and go out to eat, and the struggle with feeling, like you said, guilty that they're eating out when there's thousands still without power and water and having to eat MREs or whatever, and it's just, but at the same time, it's like, but no, the economy needs you to do that. Like, you're in a position to do that. And those business owners, those restaurants
Yeah.
that need to recover from this, like, you are blessing them. You are providing something valuable in this experience just by doing that. But it's so hard. It is so hard, to, um, yeah, process human suffering on, a level of this magnitude and so close to home. So a lot of people, this is the first time having to walk through something like that. And so, like you said, grace is so huge.
We've talked about the foundational, beautiful ways to prepare by connecting with family and friends and nurturing your own mental, spiritual, emotional health and connections. Let's get practical, because you mentioned the radio, and it made me
Yeah.
chuckle because we specifically bought radios in the past for an emergency situation. But guess what?
Mhm.
Didn't have any batteries for them.
Batteries.
So they have, different batteries. So let's talk about practical things of, what you've done for practical preparedness and anything that was missing from your list or things that you're working on.
So one of the things is chainsaw. Now,
Mhm.
Lucas Jack is brilliant running a chainsaw, and I mean, he has had a chainsaw since I think I've known him, like when we first were dating. And his chainsaw, though, was broken, and we had not gotten it repaired yet. And that was something that was like, oh man, like, we really needed to have prioritized the repair of that chainsaw, because it is such an invaluable tool in situations like this for being able to jump
Yeah.
into action and help. So definitely a chainsaw. Or me being the like family budgeter needs to be more permissive. Saying, yes, go get that done
Right.
for sure next time. Like instead of can we hold off a little bit? Because that's a bigger expense. Like, no. We will prioritize the chainsaw health much more in the future. Um, typically I am more mindful to fill up my gas tank in these type of situations. So that's something definitely was a good reminder to be more attentive to, because sometimes I just, don't feel like making one more stop. I'm ready to get home. I don't want to stop by the gas station and, or I'm just cruising along singing my tunes and not even paying attention to where my fuel level is. So having that, and because we have a generator, what we determined as well is having more fuel on hand. Like Lucas had filled up two, um, you know, I don't know if they were 5 gallon or 10 gallon like things, but I think they were two 5 gallon containers with the fuel. But it's like that we went through that so fast, and thankfully, we were able to get to a place to get refilled. But it's like if we hadn't, if we had been more landlocked or some other situation, like we wouldn't have been able to operate that. So, and again, and I think in our heads we were thinking this won't be as lengthy, like this power outage won't exceed the kind of max that we've been used to since living in the mountains for almost 20 years. And I want to get some more chickens because this was cool. On Mother's Day weekend, we went to a little market, and we had been talking about getting some chickens. And we went to this market not knowing what vendors were going to be there. And lo and behold, there was a chicken lady. And so we spontaneously were like, let's buy some chickens. And I'm like, here we go. This is the Jack way sometimes. Like, let's buy some chickens, or let's adopt a dog that we have no fence for, no pen for, but this is going to put a fire under us to suddenly get this project done. So here we go. And they just started laying about 3 weeks before the storm came. And so we were able to have fresh eggs. Sometimes things that we do, or things that we may feel prompted to do at certain times in seasons, that doesn't really always make sense to us, but it's God's little nudge because he knows what the future holds. And yeah, I find that happens quite often where it's like, why did I even do that? Or why did we decide that? And then we come find out later, oh, that's why, we were feeling that nudge. But yeah, I'd love to have a few more chickens on hand.
I've been apologizing to my husband, who has been in the preparedness mindset for some time. When we lived in Georgia, he was friends with a gentleman who ended up becoming the first survivor on the History Channel's Alone.
Oh, wow. Cool.
So,
We love
so
that
we had
show.
a group. He had a group of men that he would meet with, including Alan Kay and another friend who works for the Department of Homeland Security. And so they would, talk about preparations. And I have to say, I wasn't super supportive because it brought up some anxiety for me of thinking, well, God's going to provide for us. We don't really need to store food in our garage and things like that. So I've been humbled, and I told my husband I am now a full-fledged prepper. Yes, I've made a spreadsheet. I'm working on a pre-storm checklist of things. Go get your gas tank filled up, have some food on hand, cash on hand, dog food, cat food, that sort of thing. I'm definitely paying attention to the weather. And taking things seriously from that standpoint um, looking at ways to navigate potentially a lengthy time without water or power, looking into solar power
Mhm.
packs and things like that, and life
Mhm.
straws. Found a little
Yes.
device you can just, you know, drink out
Yes.
of the creek from. So it's like that,
Absolutely.
just in not doing it in a pressured or fearful way, but just
Mm.
slowly over time as we are able to, uh,
Mhm.
just making a checklist of items such as
Mhm.
that, and doing some research. I've joined a couple Facebook groups, which has been very interesting on preparation because, there's just people from all walks of life with different perspectives on there, and there's a lot of fear going on in the world today, not just about natural disasters, but about a lot of other
Mhm.
potentialities. And so
Mhm.
it brings me right back down into my faith. And I
Yeah.
will say that God, Holy Spirit kept bringing that verse to mind about trust in the Lord,
Mm.
all your heart, lean not on your own understanding, but in all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your path. And
Mhm.
I've really leaned on that. I
Yes.
wrote it on my um, board on my refrigerator, during this time, just to keep reminding myself that you don't have to have all the answers,
That's
that
right.
God's here, he's got us, and we can trust in that.
Yes. One of the scriptures that's been on my mind too has been the Psalm, I believe it's Psalm 61. There's a line that talks about when my heart is overwhelmed, lead me to the rock that is higher
Mhm.
than I.
Well, I just cherish this time that we have together to process what's
Yeah.
been going on, and to share with our listeners. And I just invite everybody to tune in next month.
Yes, tune in again for part 3 of this series as we reflect on the ways God comforted us through His Word and reminded us of His faithfulness. Thank you for listening and following us on this journey. It means the world to us. Our team would be honored to pray for you. Visit our website at thejoyprescription.com and under our Connect tab, click Prayer to submit your request. Thanks again for being here, and God bless.